Alright, so welcome to part 2 of my video. We're going to talk about the achievement gap in this section. So I'm going to, go through this a little bit quickly because just for time purposes, like I said, I'm in my second video. So I pulled a definition of what the achievement gap actually is from the National Association of Educational Progress. They have really good information on that website. I have it in my sources if you guys want to look at it. So what they say it is the achievement gaps occur when one group of students outperforms another group and the difference in average scores is statistically significant, that is larger than the margin of error. So this I pulled a little chart from their study in 2009. This is nationwide, and I pulled the Hispanic and white achievement gaps on purpose because it shows the English language learners and the gaps between white and them. So you can see the numbers here. It's 19 and 34 in mathematics and 29 and 39 in reading. They tested grades 4 and grade 8. You can see there is a significant um, gap between each. So that being said, I searched around and I tried to pull up some important contributing factors to this achievement gap. I'm just gonna go over two of them right now for this presentation because I think that those are the most meaningful towards people, minority groups in bilingual education and ESL classes. So the availability of resources is one of the biggest concerns. Not all schools are created equal. So as we've been discussing this whole semester, there's a discrepancy in funding between schools and socioeconomic status, of low socioeconomic status. So from this little same study, I pulled these statistics. So 75 and 70% of Hispanic students qualify for National Lunch School Program, and that is compared to 29 of and 24% of white students who qualify for the same program. So you can right away see the higher numbers right away, like right there, of this just through this school program. So obviously, if like you're in a better socioeconomic status, you have more time to contribute and have more motivation to do better in school. Language barriers, especially in this context of ELL students, is another of the more important things. 35% of Hispanic students in the fourth grade are ELL, and 20% in the eighth grade are ELL. So, and this is compared to 9 and 5% in the two grades of all students. So you can see kind of just like the enormity of students that are struggling, not only to to learn the language, but also to keep up with everybody else who already has mastered English, because you're basically doing the double work, trying to learn and trying to understand as well. So that being said, I am not going to go on to this racial achievement gap case study that I found in the next section. Alright, so now I want to talk about this racial achievement gap case study that I found because I think it's very interesting. I'm only going to briefly go over it because just for time reasons, um, I'm already on my second video. So, okay. So, the quote that that I pulled from there, which I think is very important in this context of, ESL and bilingual education, says school settings can be stressful to almost all students regardless of race. However, for African American students, the academic environment involves an extra degree of threat not experienced by non minority students due to the negative stereotypes about the intelligence of their race. Um, so basically, what they did was the experiment was a double-blind case study. So that means that both groups were blind. The teachers didn't know, the students didn't know. So they did two groups of middle schoolers, one from a suburban and one from a lower to middle class middle school. They experimented on 119 African Americans and 124 European Americans. I shouldn't say experimented on, I mean like they participated in the experiment. So the experimental group, so what they did was that students in the experimental group would receive enclosed envelopes with their names on it during times of like high evaluative stress. So that means like during test times and such, and all these things, they would receive this envelope, and inside the envelope there would be affirmation exercises, and they were presented as just like normal class, like in class like exercises and whatnot. So what this would be, it would be like, oh, what is most valuable to you and why. So then the control group, they would get same thing. They would also get envelopes, except in their envelopes it would be about their least important value, and it would be always about someone else, not about themselves. So what they found in these case studies were that the African American students in the experimental group earned higher scores than the African Americans in the control group. They also closed. They realized that the gap was reduced by 40%, which was pretty significant. And the white participants demonstrated no change either, even if they were in the experimental group or in the control group. All the white participants stayed about the same grade-wise. So I thought that was a pretty interesting case study, and I just wanted to share that with you real quick. All right, so now I'm going to talk about the effects on white privilege and the achievement gaps on ESL and bilingual education, and how this affects the students, of these programs. So one of the first things that I would like to point out was that the study of a second language is actually considered an asset for non-minority and non-ELL students, but it's actually a liability for an English language learner. By that I mean that being bilingual is actually not encouraged, it's actually actively discouraged, especially in English-only ESL classes where you're only meant to speak in English and you can't communicate in your own language. So you can kind of see the discrepancy there, how, especially nowadays with this whole push for globalization and the global workforce and whatnot, there's a lot of push towards people and students and young kids into learning a second language and being bilingual. However, you see how then for one group of people this is considered a benefit, but for another group of people it's actually a liability. So the way that I like to think about this is that in high school or in university or what have you, you have to take a second language in most cases. And at the beginning, I personally took French. At the beginning of these cases, you get to talk in English and talk in your own language as you're learning. However, it is not the same case for people who are in ESL classes, where, especially in English-only ESL classes, where they only have to speak in English even though they're just learning the language. So it is, in my opinion, a bit counterproductive. So how are you supposed to learn a language if you do not understand? At the same time, and it's not really out of their own volition, then they're not being they want to speak in their own language or whatnot. It is outside forces that are forcing them into this like box. At the same time too, you have this, we're discussing about the racial achievement gap and how it keeps getting wider, and there's efforts to reduce it and stuff like that. Um, for ELL students, all the tests are done in English. They're learning a language. They are, like I said before, they're faced with double the work than every other kid that already knows English has, because on the one hand they have to learn the material, but on the other hand they also have to try to understand the language that they're just now being um, introduced to. So all these tests, they don't even give the directions in their own language. They all give it in English. So the kids and the students are trying you know to solve the problem, but then how are you going to solve the problem if you don't even understand the directions, or you're just struggling to understand the directions? um, so you can see then how that would contribute to this racial achievement gap, and how it keeps how it can kind of that's why it's basically one of those, the reasonings behind those high numbers is because of practices like this. um, because obviously you're not going to do well if you don't understand what they want, what the test wants of you. um, Also, I read the interview by Christine with Christine Sleeter, and in that she's talking about multiculturalism, and she mentions this teaching students from a colorblind approach, and how that is actually detrimental to most of the students, because you are by colorblind approach. What I mean is, if you say like I don't see a Mexican kid, I just see a kid. You are by saying stuff like that, by saying that you do not see race at all, you are implicitly promoting racial discourse and racial like racist thought, because you're stating that there is a problem with color, if that makes any sense. Like if you say I don't see color, I just see a person, you're stating that there is a problem with color, and that's why you're not going to think about it. Also, on the same time, you are refusing to acknowledge and to learn about you know English language learners cultural backgrounds, or just other students, minority students cultural backgrounds and their traditions. And by doing that, you are implicitly agreeing that the um, the culture of this particular country is dominant or better than the others. Um, we talked about this a little bit in the perks of being, when I was talking about white privilege, and how there is no penalty for being oblivious, and I feel like that also you know goes into that. So with that being said, I'm now going to conclude this presentation, which has been very long. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy.